Welcome to Coached Soul, a podcast for a better you. Your host, Steve Hudgens, is a licensed professional counselor, and your co-host, Julia Canton, is a therapeutic coach. Together, they discuss various topics, providing a different perspective on life and insight that you are not alone. On a non-emergency basis, you may contact them at area code 918-280-8690 or coachsoul.com to provide them with new topics, feedback, or to request an appearance on the show. And now, here's your host, Steve Hudgens.
All right, welcome back. And Julia, you know, life is like a box of Julias. You never know what you're going to get. And so I have been anxiously waiting for your return. And so what a great segue to talk about anxious attachment style. What do you think?
I think it's a great segue. And considering that I can be a little bit flexible, sometimes way too flexible. I was going to use the word flighty, but flighty would indicate that I never come back. Maybe I've been doing avoidant. I mean, how do I know? Maybe I should have been on last week's. Maybe I've been avoiding you.
You know, attachment, it's interesting because in my doctoral class, I have been doing crisis and trauma this week for the semester. And one of the things that I've discovered that if I approach people, especially with couples and working with them from their attachment style, it seems interesting.
Oh, it is. It's very, very, and it's fun. I mean, they may not think it's fun when they're going through it, but as a therapeutic coach and you as a therapist, licensed LPC, that you know it is kind of fun. It's like doing investigations.
Yes.
When I was in law enforcement, I loved digging in and trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, seeing what was around that next curve or corner. So attachment styles actually presents a great opportunity for us to do that with our clients. But more important, and let me rephrase that. It gives us a knowledge base to work from to help them figure out how they want to cope with life, how they want to heal from their traumas, how they want to live more vibrantly versus us doing it for them. Because, you know, we don't do it for anybody. I mean, I was going to make a sex joke, but I was like, okay, I don't know who my audience is here. So.
Yeah, let's just keep it G-rated for now. And I think we're going to be safe on that one.
For anybody that knows me, then you know that life is it's full of, moments of Julia. There we go. You hit that one on that.
Exactly. So with anxious, you know, there's about 19% of adults that have an anxious attachment style. Yeah. And a lot of times, you ever heard of the word needy? That person is really needy in my relationship. And
have you ever been called that yourself?
In the beginning, a long time ago, yes.
Yes,
you know,
same here.
And I thought I was avoidant, but I really wasn't avoidant. My style was more anxious because I was fear of rejection and abandonment. My father was in the military and served for 26 years. Thank you for his service. And he had to go to Thailand when I was about a year and a half. Mm. And I remember he told me he had a close bond with me. He leaves, comes back, and I didn't know who the heck he was. And this wasn't the first time. The second time is when I was about 7 or 8 living in San Antonio and stationed at Lackland Air Force Base. And he had to go to Korea on a hardship tour for 1 year. You know, hardship tours are challenging for military personnel. You know, with me being in the military stationed at Fort Hood, we go for battles and preparing for war and games and such. And so we're away from our families. Well, that doesn't help kids. Right. And a lot of times I think when you're growing up as a military child, you are creating an atmosphere that causes anxiety and anxiousness attachment styles. What do you think about, you know, when you have a significant other or a significant person that's in your life and it's an in and out. Kind of talk a little bit about anxiety here, the anxious attachment style.
Well, I think that there's actually several points because I love the fact that you use the words that significant person or partner or whatever relationship it may be, because it could be parent-child, that they're in and out of initially the child's life. Okay. So one, I would like to state that it's that in and out, that there's no consistency for the child that causes this anxious attachment style in the first place. I know that in like for our veterans, the military, that they're working because as research is showing up, they are doing things to try to keep our veterans and their families in closer contact through videos and Zooming and things along those lines. But sometimes it's just not the same as having the individual present in the child's life in a physical way. We also are in a world where divorce rates are at its highest level. And although two adults could come together and be adults, they are working from their attachment styles and oftentimes working against each other, which promotes, if you will, children that have types of insecure attachments. And so as a society, I think that this is just perpetuating. It's going on all the time. And though children can't be responsible for what they've endured or experienced, that may cause a certain insecure attachment style, whether it's anxious or it's, oh my gosh, my brain just went disorganized, that as adults, we are responsible for working through that. And so this is the key that I would like our audience to hear, is that just because you developed a specific attachment style as a child does not mean that you have to stay in that attachment style forever. It's not a label that is imprinted or tattooed on you. That with work, okay, with processing, with development of coping skills, that we can work into a more secure attachment style versus insecure. That does take a lot of work, and I think you would agree with that very much. But you asked me a question, what do I think about it? I think that we are dealing in a world, a society, where if we understood the power behind present parenting, okay, and present relationships, of both partners. I'm not saying that each one needs to meet the needs of the other, but that we understand the value of being present for that other partner, that the outcomes of these attachments would have a brighter future. So that's my thoughts on it.
No, I totally agree. And to kind of backtrack and to piggyback off of what you shared, it's important that parents are present in your children's life, not as a helicopter parent, because that's the
Correct.
other extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And that causes anxiety and insecure attachment as well when you become too helicopter, right? And so when you think about, nowadays we're very fortunate that we can do Zoom, we can do Skype and things of that nature to be able to talk to our loved ones that are overseas. Now I'm going to date myself. Cassette tapes. I remember my father would send cassette tapes to us by mail. And my dad would record his voice and talk to us as if we were on the phone, because back then, long distance was expensive to call to North Korea.
Yes,
so what he would do was send a cassette tape of recording, and we would record one and send back to him just to kind of, catch up. I have no clue. I wish I would have had an idea of what my parents did with those, because there are some letters, which is funny because I've got a letter from my grandmother back from 1981. My dog had passed away. We were living in Rapid City, South Dakota. So that's funny. We went from hell hot San Antonio to hell freezes over South Dakota. But it's those memories that we can provide with secure attachment by video. Communication is the key. But being present in that person's life can help facilitate a secure attachment. Now, when we talk about anxious attachment, it's not being present. The child begins to be able to wonder, where is their parent? Separation anxiety from a
It's
kid
a lack
that
of
cries.
consistency is
There
what
you
is
go.
that. It's
Right.
it's not just the absence, it's the inconsistency, but it's also not following through. So a lot of trust credits, typically when a child finally develops an insecure attachment, it usually means that something wasn't followed through multiple times. And
Right.
so that child learns that they can't depend on others, especially their caretakers, to follow through. In some cases that can't be avoided, but I think that as parents, if we would just, or even caregivers or nurturers, is that if we just, I think comes back to the understanding that our word is our bond. And so if we say we're going to do something, especially when dealing with children, that one, we don't promise something we can't follow through with, and two, making sure that if we do say something, unless you are broken, bleeding out, and throwing up, that's what I used to say to my kids, then I just now remember that's so cool, and that you do what you said you were going to do. And so again, when that doesn't happen, these children just learn to no longer trust the people that are supposed to be teaching them what trust is about.
And that's difficult, especially you mentioned a while ago about divorcing. It's an ultimate high, and working as a director in an inpatient facility and doing some therapy with these kids of divorced parents, it is tough because these kids don't understand why this parent hates them so much, and that's their interpretation, because that parent,
Interpretation.
yep, does not want to have any kind of responsibility or accountability for their actions. That's what I have to sometimes be careful when I'm in therapy, that I don't cause a countertransference. Not that I have anything to resolve, but I get so frustrated or upset, or I can empathize with my clients because I did fight for custody and I did get joint, but I had primary custodianship only because I fought for my children. And it agitates me when there are men that don't step up to the plate because they're fear-based, because they don't want to confront their exes, is where I'm going with this. And so because of that, they misplace the hurt onto their children, and they don't want anything to do with them. And that creates an anxiety within the kids, because it's like, does my parent love me? Does my parent, and I'm not trying to throw everything on the man either, because there are some relationships where women have left their children high and dry as well. And when you think about secure attachment, that's where you have both parents are invested in their child and provide some security basis on that. I think even in a divorce situation, if you have good co-parenting and these parents are there, that still can help, even though the family broke and there could be some anxiety that has developed. But if the bond of co-parenting is healthy enough, who's to say that child can't develop into a secure attachment?
Well, and I'd like to state this. One of the healthiest relationships, actually there's two. One of the healthiest relationships I ever saw during a divorce is when bio mom and dad decided to get a divorce. Okay. They had two daughters, and both of them decided after they were divorced that they were going to see somebody else. And so they both bio parents ended up marrying. Okay. The spouses, the new spouses, part of the agreement coming into that relationship is that bio mom and dad are taking responsibility of rearing these children in happy, safe environments. And either you become friends, okay, with the other parent, or we're not going to work, because it is paramount that we raise these children together so they understand that we haven't left the picture, that we can be mature adults, and that what happened between us as bio parents had nothing to do with them. They're still married. Both couples are still married, and their kids are grown adults now. And I was like, my gosh, I mean, they didn't fight over anything. They just simply said, we're going to get a divorce, but this is how we're going to choose to parent. And they have done it. So that's the first thing. And then the other healthy one that I thought was, I just love it still to this day, and I wish there were more parents that would consider this, is that in the divorce process, the parents didn't fight over who was going to get the main house. Do you know who got to move in and out every single week or every 2 weeks? It wasn't the kids. The kids stayed in the main house, okay? And it was the adults that came and went. And it was their lives that got disrupted because they chose to get the divorce, but they also chose to put the kids' well-being and security in as the top priority. And then the third thing that I know I didn't say three, but the other third option that I've fallen in love with, and I've only seen it one time, so I don't know if there's any research on it or not, is where both birth parents chose to live in the same house on opposite ends. Kids stayed in the home, stable. Parents lived in two separate bedrooms, opposite ends. They could come and go as they wanted or as they needed. Their personal lives did not spill into the home where the kids were being raised. Okay. Again, what do all three of those examples show the kids? That you're secure, you're safe, okay, and we're not going anywhere. We're not going to allow our personal choices to take priority over your well-being. You will end up with some, because life is life. There may be another thing that comes into place that you don't even see that may cause an insecure attachment of some kind, but it's not going to be with the parents. If they will choose to co-parent in a healthy way. So anyway, we haven't even covered, I know we drove right into this because you and I know what we know what anxious attachment is, but Steve, what are some of the traits, if our listeners haven't figured it out yet, some of the traits of anxious attachment style?
Well, when you think about some of these anxious moments, right? You're going to have some triggers to it.
Of course.
Anxious triggers is going to be things like unresponsiveness. There's a perceived threat or a loss that sometimes could be self-sabotaging to their own relationships because of fear of abandonment that comes in. And then they begin to doubt or fear of, why do you love me? Why do you stay with me?
Yeah, and that constant need for assurance. Yes.
Right. Sometimes their partner may become more independent, and so they become more codependent. So some of the signs of an anxiousness is codependency.
It is. And clingy. You use the words needy in the very beginning, very clingy. And what about low self-esteem? Are they someone with an anxious attachment style usually isn't one that goes, oh my gosh, I know who I am, because their identity is regulated by what others think of them, which again, codependency, I love that word. We do need to do a section on codependency, because codependency is actually in every single aspect of the attachment styles to some degree or another. It just depends on if it's healthy or unhealthy. In this particular case, codependency is way unhealthy.
Well, and that's one of the things too that we can do a lot more, because in these attachment styles, like anxious, sometimes I feel like the personality disorder that comes out of the anxious attachment style is histrionic.
I would agree.
And the next segment that we're going to do is the disorganized attachment style. that I believe that this is where you get your narcissism and borderline personality disorders to come from. And we'll talk more about that in our next segment.
Yes.
Right. But when you think about the anxiety, can you get over this? And the answer is yes.
Yes. Yes.
You know, it's funny because I hear, well, I Googled this and I must be this type of personality, or I Googled this and I'm like, okay, don't let Google be your doctor. It's not Dr. Google. Okay. Dr. Pepper is Dr. Pepper. Just let the professionals kind of diagnose. But the problem is sometimes there's misdiagnosis too. And so we have to be aware. And that's the thing of how do we fix, or how do we manage an anxious attachment style, is being able to adjust your behavior, being mindful of how your attachment leads into self-sabotaging behaviors.
Well, and I think you just hit the nail right there on the head. Being aware. I would say that the majority of the time when a person hasn't gone in to do their own personal work, that they are operating on systems in the background or the backdrop, okay, that they don't even know is contributing to their misery, okay, which is associated with the attachment styles, okay. So the first indicator of successful behavioral change is the idea that I am going to become self-aware of when I'm doing certain things that contribute to this other behavior and that I want to change. And I will tell you that is one of the key components to overcoming addiction. Okay. There are so many addictions. And one of the very first things that they say in these 12-step programs or these other type of recovery programs is awareness is key, because you got to first know that there is a problem that needs to be solved or changed. And
but in
so
that anxious, even in the anxious, there's that fear. And just because most people think that counseling is taboo, they're afraid of coming in and making changes or being told that they're wrong. And it's important. I mean, I went through some therapy, and that's how I was able to go from an anxious style attachment where my parents are still married. But I've learned even through therapy that my mom is borderline. She has a borderline personality disorder. Well, guess what I married into with my kid's mom? The exact same thing. So attachment styles, sometimes you get used to what you're used to and you marry into what you've been used to.
Yes. And I actually want to contribute to that right there, because I think it's really, really important, is that even though anxious attachment does not give you a sense of security, because you're always in that state of anxiousness, okay, that's going on, or fear-based, not feeling enough, is that you actually become more comfortable in that anxious state than you do when you're out of it. Okay. And the problem with that is that that initially, when you're first beginning to do this work, it is going to be significantly uncomfortable to change the behavior that you are used to dwelling in. And that right there, a lot of times will dissuade people from wanting to do their inner work, because they're going, well, this is painful, this hurts, this is uncomfortable. It's easier for me to go and deal with this anxiety over here than it is to deal with this new anxiety that requires me to change. And so I just think it's important to know that it's not an easy route. And the thing is that you experience discomfort and pain and stress and anxiety on both sides, whether you stay where you are or you make the change. The hope in the change is that you relieve some of that, okay, and you take personal responsibility and gain some of your power back by simply knowing that you've made the choice to make the change. The other way, there was no choice for you.
It was
what you were talking.
And an illustration that I like to use within my counseling sessions with individuals to help them to understand They say, well, therapy is going to be hurtful. Yes, therapy can be hurtful, but it's also helpful. And so when I think about this illustration, we have this trauma as a child. So that's like a metal splinter going into your hand, and it hurts. Now we say, well, we can throw medication at it to stop the pain. Sure, it'll stop the pain, but if we don't do therapy where it hurts, it's going to still hurt, even though we have medication.
Right. You got to take it out. I mean, the metal splinter has to be removed.
And as counseling does that, when we remove it, what's going to happen? Ow, it hurts. Well, sure. But once it's being removed, we may have a scar, but it doesn't hurt anymore because removed it. And so that's how I equate therapy, is to remove these splinters out. Yes, medication helps, but not by itself. Medication and counseling together tends to help because the body keeps score, and we want to be able to remove these splinters so the body does no longer keep the score. And you think about anxious attachment style, think about irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease. A lot of this is because your body holds on to the anxiety, and you're wondering, okay, my stomach is really cramping, and that's because we get into the anxiety style. This has been a great segment in anxious style. We're running out of time, Julia, as always. So I'm anxious about, okay, we're fixing the end. What are we going to do? So have a great day and be blessed.
Be blessed. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope to have you back next week. Until then, be safe and be kind.